Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Realistic 151 project, the series where I draw realistic versions of the first generation of Pokemon using the concepts of stylization and fantastical biology to inform my redesigns. Like I said last time, I've decided not to continue going in Pokedex order, both because I have some great ideas for later Pokemon burning a hole in my pocket, but also because spooky season starts in a couple of days, and I wanted the freedom to tackle some equally spooky Pokemon. But since it's still September, I'm gonna tackle one more summery Pokemon before we plunge ourselves into autumn. I say that, but I'm really just looking for an excuse to do one of my favorite Gen 1 Pokemon today, so we will be tackling Poliwag, Poliwhirl, Poliwrath, and Politoad. Starting off at the beginning with Poliwag, I had a pretty solid idea going in about the subtle changes that I would make. The first and most obvious was how I was going to represent the swirl on the belly. At first glance, it might just look like some sort of pattern, but Poliwag is based on a real-life frog species whose tadpoles have transparent skin. This allows you to see their intestines, which, what do you know, are arranged in a swirl pattern. So I decided to draw the swirl as if it were some sort of internal structure that we were getting a peek at through a transparent window of tissue on the front of its belly. The feet were possibly the biggest change that I made, as the cutesy ball feet might work for a cartoon monster, but feet like that are not really found on any real-life creature. So with the eyes, I thought that changing them slightly, both to be more frog-like and also to sit in a more believable position, a little more to the side, would give it a more hydrodynamic shape, which would give it a touch of believability that this Pokemon needed. A lot of Gen 1, and I guess Pokemon as a whole, have these funny little characteristics that are less common in Western designs that come directly from Japanese design sensibilities, one of which being the exaggerated puffy lips found on these designs. Why exactly a tadpole has lips is beyond me, however, I did my best to represent them with a comparative set of uncomfortably human-like lips, in my opinion. Lastly was the color. Though Poliwag and its evolutions are in their official art a vibrant blue, I wanted to go with a darker color and patterning that made it look more tadpole-like. So here is my interpretation of Poliwag, the tadpole Pokemon. When I was a kid, I really disliked Poliwhirl and Poliwrath as they weren't very frog-like, and I expected a tadpole Pokemon to evolve into something like a frog Pokemon, which technically we did get with its branched evolution, but we're not there yet. Later on as a teenager and now as an adult, however, I've grown a pretty strong appreciation for the unique idea that this design went with. A tadpole evolving into a legged and tailless tadpole who boxes is a pretty cool idea. With Poliwhirl, I made a few distinctions in how I chose to represent the more fantastical aspects. With its swirl, I chose to make it tighter than the one on Poliwag to show the increase in size. I also chose to let it fade into the opaque skin of the rest of the body, mostly because hard edges are less common in real-life biology, and I didn't like the way the hard transition looked in Poliwag. For the feet, I went with a similar approach to the previous form, making them more obviously frog feet with toed digits, and giving them more realistic musculature that would lend more credence to the idea that this Pokemon could hold itself up. The final choice I had to make was about the gloves. I know that a lot of people dislike it when Pokemon wear clothes, and I also know that the popular thing to do when drawing realistic Pokemon is to represent these clothing parts as patterns or structures that resemble clothing without actually being clothes. However, I feel like with these Pokemon that do have clothing as a part of the design, removing that aspect takes away an important part of their unique image. So going with the less popular option, I decided that my Poliwhirl would have gloves, and that I tried in my own way to make them look as believable as possible, with a cottony texture and wrinkles where the glove would be bunched up by the cuffs and curled around the fingers. Wherever Poliwhirl and Poliwrath got their gloves is beyond me. I don't know exactly what a frog tadpole guy would want with them, but gosh darn it, he got gloves and he's keeping them. So this is my interpretation of Poliwhirl, the tadpole Pokemon. Finally, sort of, we have Poliwrath. Poliwrath is one of my favorite Pokemon, as it turns out. Maybe it's because my partner in Pokemon Go is a shiny Poliwrath, so there might be some favoritism going on there. However, I do absolutely love the idea and execution of this design. That being said, I do believe it has its flaws. I had issues with Poliwrath when I was younger, like I said before, for multiple reasons, one of which was the frog idea that we already talked about, which is no longer really a good reason for me to dislike this guy, but the other is still prevalent in my mind, and that is that this form is not as unique from the previous form as I would like. The few changes that I wanted to emphasize were that having a more obviously frog-like mouth on the upper border of its transparent belly, and its wider, more muscular shape. It too got more realistic frog eyes and frog legs, and a set of very oddly tailored 3-fingered gloves. Now, like every video in this series, for my notes on what having these Pokemon as pets would be like. And I don't think owning any member of the Poliwrath line would make too bad of pets. For Poliwag, it would probably be like owning a giant tadpole. You'd need maybe like a kiddie pool to keep it alive, and for the others, I'd imagine it would be as easy as keeping a giant toad. Well, as easy as keeping a giant toad might be. For Poliwhirl and Poliwrath, it maybe requires specialized training, especially in the Poliwrath case, so maybe you should invest in a gym membership or a punching bag to keep it in tip-top shape, but as it stands, besides that, it would probably be normal frog care, right? And when it comes to its branched evolution Politoad, you probably don't even need those specific lifestyle modifications. Maybe just like a large pool. This Politoad is literally just a frog. But before we get into that, here is my interpretation of Poliwrath, the tadpole Pokemon, again. Now, you didn't think I'd forget Politoad, did you? When I was younger, Politoad was my favorite of the options in the branched evolution. However, as time has gone on, my love for this one has been usurped by my love for the more unique design of Poliwrath. Now, that's not to say that I dislike this design in any way. I still love Poliwhirl, but he's just a frog. There's nothing wrong with that, but he's just a frog. The only thing that seems to tie these Pokemon together is the belly swirl, and even that is a bit of a stretch due to its different presentation. In Politoad, the belly swirl looks more like a pattern than an intestinal window that the previous forms were hinting at. But this series isn't about fixing designs, it's about interpretation in a realistic style, so I kept the hands and feet as they were portrayed, but I did give them more realistic proportions, which I think made them look longer than you would expect, but, you know, real-life frog legs and hands just kind of look weird like that. With the eyes, I went a little more different than I would have on any other day, and I decided to make them more obviously frog-like, which is admittedly a bit of a departure from the original design, but I still think it looks good nonetheless. I chose to represent its rosy cheeks as these flat spots that you can find in a lot of frog species behind the eyes, which I think are supposed to be its ears, weirdly enough. And the final edition would be the antenna-like thing on its head. I don't really know what this is, but I tried to toe the line in making it seem biologically plausible while keeping up my adherence to the original design. So here is my interpretation of Politoad, the frog Pokemon. So here are my designs for Poliwag, Poliwhirl, Poliwrath, and by commenter suggestion to add the later generation editions, Politoad. Which one is your favorite, and more importantly, which Generation 1 Pokemon would you like to see next? Let me know in the comments below. But for now, thank you all for watching, and a special thanks to my patrons STE, Alan Michael White, RO Bolt, and Griffin for your continued support. It truly means the world. And if you want to join them in their support of series like the Realistic 151 on this channel by getting cool perks like early access to my videos, then you can do so by clicking the link below and signing up for as little as $3 a month. Even better, it's no commitment, so if you find that it's not your thing, you can cancel at any time. Thank you again to my patrons, and thank you all for watching. If you liked this video, then leave a like, and if you would like to see more videos like it, then subscribe, and turn on the bell to get notified when I upload next.